Okay, so in this video I want to talk about my impressions on the Corvette after having driven it, and how do I feel about this car now. Do I feel the same about it, or has my sort of opinion of this car been ruined? You know, which I would imagine that a lot of folks out there that say that this car is a ripoff or too expensive are probably thinking, well, if the Mustang starts for about 44, 45,000, 46,000, something like that, is it actually worth it? I mean, because the base Corvette starts at 65. You can obviously, you know, the taxes and stuff, you're going to be out the door probably around $70-something thousand, and you know, that's a significant amount of money for most people. I've said it in previous videos, I did not pay like MSRP for this car. I got about $5,000 to $6,000 off MSRP. Again, this is like a GT performance pack car with base interior. In a way, driving the Corvette didn't completely change my opinion about this particular car, but it did make me sort of realize the value proposition that the Corvette represents. I don't want to compare this car to the Corvette because I feel that car is sort of is a different animal. First of all, you can't get it in a stick. So if you're interested in driving a stick car with a manual transmission and maintaining that manual transmission experience, you're not going to get that with the Corvette. Doesn't matter. You'd have to go to a C7, which I hear are incredible. I've never driven one. I've always wanted to drive a C7, and you know, obviously you got to go used. But if you wanted to buy like a brand new car, you know, you're kind of stuck with the, you know, you got to buy a C8, and you can't get that in the manual. You know, the C8 offers a lot of practicality for being like a supercar kind of vehicle. You know, a lot of people would easily classify that car as a supercar. I don't know. It's very close. It is definitely the most exotic feeling car that I've ever driven in my life. It's definitely the fastest car I've ever driven in my life, even compared to this car. Even with this car having a very similar amount of power, you know, it's don't get me wrong, this car is fast, but it doesn't hook up like that Corvette did. That Corvette hooked up like no wheel spin. You just floor it and it's going. It's off to the races. The fact that this car comes with a manual transmission completely changes the experience. This is a more engaging driving experience than the Corvette. The Corvette had a lot more pizzazz, you could say. It was definitely a faster car. The interior was on a different level. I mean, like, I'm just going to be real about it. I can even imagine that the base interior, I was driving like a 2LT or a 3LT car. I would imagine that even the base interior is better than this car. This car, don't get me wrong, for being like a base interior is kind of nice. I like it. You know, this is more of a normal vehicle. That the Corvette is just, you know, sort of in a different league, I gotta admit. If I was in the market for an automatic Mustang and I did not care about having back seats, I would absolutely consider buying a Corvette. If you don't need those back seats, if you don't need the practicality of a normal sized trunk, definitely consider the Corvette. It should be at the top of your list. You definitely got to test drive one. And the fact, and again, if you don't care about not having a manual transmission, if you're cool with that, definitely go with the Corvette. Check it out. It's totally worth it. Fortunately, for those who have purchased a Corvette, they appear to be really holding their value. I haven't seen one under 50 grand yet. They haven't crossed into the 40s, even though the cars are like now. Even though the cars are now approaching 5 years old, since the first ones are still in the 50s, mid 50s, high 50s, low 60s. You really can't get a deal on a Corvette yet. I mean, it still sort of makes sense to go and buy a brand new one if you can, without any kind of markup or anything. I think the markups for the Corvettes have certainly come down. You probably don't need to pay a markup to get one anymore. I know I didn't pay a markup for this car. I mean, this isn't like a Darkhorse or anything. I didn't see a lot of markups for Darkhorses when I was shopping, because I did briefly consider a Darkhorse because, you know, it's just, I just couldn't I couldn't make the leap to, you know, pay over 60 grand for a Mustang, you know? It's just, you know, there's a psychological component to me not being able to do that. But, and I honestly, I don't think I could ever pay 60 grand for any car. It's just not my thing. I go by your income level. I'd sort of take your gross income, divide it in half. That's pretty much what you should spend. So if you earn 70 grand a year, you shouldn't go above $35,000 on a car price. That's sort of like my math that I've always used, and it served me well. I've never gone over my head, including with this car. I comfortably can afford this car. Now, a C8, I would be uncomfortable. It would be significantly more expensive to get a C8, even a used one. And obviously, when you buy a used car, you end up, you know, you have other issues. You know, you have mechanical problems. You know, I wanted a worry-free ownership experience when I bought this car. That's why I decided to go new, because every time I went on like Auto Trader or something to try to find a used 3 to 4 year old Mustang, they were within $6,000 to $8,000 for a new one. I would be like, why not spend another 6 to 8, get a full warranty, and get a newer car with more technology? So that's just the way I saw it. A lot of people think differently. I've gotten a lot of comments with people saying that this car, I still get it, they still say it's overpriced, that it's too expensive. Some other people have a more measured approach. But overall, you know, I'm very happy that I got to drive the C8. It was definitely an experience. It didn't sour my experience with this car because, again, I think it provides a completely different kind of driving experience with the stick, with the manual transmission. It's just a different animal. And, you know, it's fast enough for me, and, you know, it still turns heads. Probably doesn't turn as many heads as the Corvette does, but I still like this car, and it's giving me the experience that I wanted for. I specifically bought this car to fulfill one of my bucket list items in my life. I'm now 42 years old, and I finally learned to drive stick when I bought this car. I'm going to tell you a short story. When I was in my early 20s, I was gonna buy like a new Scion GT, if you remember those cars. It was like a Scion, it was like an offshoot like brand from Toyota, and I test drove a manual transmission car, and they had a manual and they had an automatic on the lot, but I decided to go with the automatic because I chickened out. I didn't want to have any issues, you know, because I think when I test drove the car stalled out on me, and I was embarrassed. So I eventually just walked out with the automatic. I regretted that decision every day. That's when I should have learned to drive stick when I was in my when I was in my early 20s. But, you know, thankfully, you know, my life has led me to this position where I can finally like right that wrong, you know, and just sort of just finally learn to do it, you know, and it's really not that hard. This car is incredibly easy to drive, you know. You just got to find that grab point, and in this car, it's kind of towards the top of the clutch pedal range, you could say. It's you know, you sort of get used to it. You know, another reason why I'm very happy with these, and I mentioned it in other videos, is that you know, this experience with manual transmissions is going away. It's something that we probably took for granted, and eventually it's going to come to an end. And I'm not going to say for certain that this is going to be the last Mustang with a V8 and a stick. There might be another generation. I don't know if there are going to be 2 more generations, but this is very close to the end. And this may be the last one that I ever buy personally. And I'm extremely happy. Wow, look at that Lamborghini. Wow, look at that. Yeah, you can't. You can't do that. Oh, rip. Wow, I gotta love that second gear here. Yeah, you can't do that with a Corvette. Sure, you can go fast, and it's sort of like driving a go-kart, but throwing your own gears is priceless. And if you could do it, it's something to do. It's really cool. I would highly recommend you get this experience. You know, driving that C8 Corvette it sort of felt, somebody stopped me and asked me, was it like, does it beat you up? Is it hard to drive? And I pretty much said it sort of it felt like a normal car. It wasn't anything terribly, there wasn't anything intimidating about the C8 Corvette. It felt like I was driving it didn't beat you up in the, it was very planted when he took corners. Not that there were a lot of corners in Florida, but it was certainly very planted. It handled really well for it not having like the Z51 package. It was just easy to drive, and that's sort of like, I think Chevy did a good job of making like an everyday supercar that pretty much anybody could drive. But I think Ford did a really good job with this car. And even though, the fact that the Corvette exists is a problem that a lot of people that are in the market for a new, sports car or performance car, it's something that they need to think about, seriously. Should I buy a Mustang given that the Corvette C8 exists? And now you can get them at MSRP or even cheaper if you go used. So, like I said, if you're in the market for a new car, and you definitely are cool with getting an automatic and not having back seats, you really got to consider the C8. But if you're like me, and I'm always been more of a Ford guy myself, I really appreciate what Ford did with this car, and the fact that they kept it around in a very familiar configuration, motor in the front, back seat, decent sized trunk. I like what Ford did here, and I'm very happy. I'm still very happy with my car, even though the C8 is pretty awesome too. But anyway, I think I'm going to leave it with that. I feel like I've sort of rambled long enough about my post C8 experience and whether or not I'm still happy with this car. But yes, overall I am. If you have any questions about either the C8 versus the Mustang, the C8 in general, or this car, or the 2024, 2025 Mustang, feel free to leave them in the comments. Really helps a lot if you can like and subscribe. Really trying to build this channel, and I'll see you in the next one.